Mr. Hausman, this is not a clothing optional resort.
You gotta help me, man. I just locked myself out of my room trying to get some ice.
I can help with that. Do you have a valid ID so we can verify who you are?
No. I'm naked, but I do have other significant identifying features.
Do you live, eat, and sleep the hotel industry? Looking to brush up on your game? You've come to the right place. Welcome to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast with your host, Glenn Hausman.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to this week's No Vacancy with me, your host, Glenn Hausman. I want to thank you all for listening and showing me such support week after week after week. We are having such a great time doing this show, and it is so rewarding to get back all of the comments that you give me. So if you want to send me a note, send it to @TravelingGlenn on Twitter, or drop me an email at glenn@rouse.media. I want to make sure everybody checks out Here to Stay TV. That should be launching really shortly, so I cannot wait to be bringing that to you. I was at Global Business Travel Association meeting this week, shot a lot of great videos, and you're going to want to check them out, because I spoke to a lot of folks that are out there that are changing the way that our lovely business works. I spoke to Airbnb. I spoke with Uber. I spoke with Avis Car Rental that's going to actually be focusing on a lot of fun different things such as autonomous vehicles. It's going to be pretty cool. You're going to want to check out all these interviews, and I'll see if I can get some audio links for this particular show as well. Don't forget to check out the Hotel ROI series with Hotel Management. I'll be hosting a bunch of those events upcoming in the next few months, and I'd love to have you part of it. Now, before I bring in my guest for this, I'd be remiss to say, hey, guys, check out Kevin Barry Fine Art, my fine sponsor here, kevinbarryfineart.com, and you'll hear more from them later. Whew, that's a whole mouthful, and usually a little bit more than I do before bringing in my guest. And today I have with me Mr. Tom Engel. You probably know of TR Engel Group. They've been around for maybe as long as I have been. So let's welcome Mr. Thomas Engel. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I was just up in Boston this week for GBTA. You didn't happen to go to that, did you?
No, I did not attend.
Well, it's a shame you missed out on a really good event there, Tom. I guess, we're not going to get your expert commentary on what happened there, so we're going to have to rely on me. But how's life up in Boston these days?
Good. Business is solid. Some interesting new developments happening in the emerging Seaport District of Boston. Mm-hmm. So overall, this is an excellent to be in the industry.
Yeah, I got to tell you there, Tom, it seems like there were construction cranes absolutely everywhere in downtown Boston. It's very exciting. And I was remarking to my producer on the Here to Stay TV project, it seems like the amount of development that's going on in whatever city I go to, it feels like it's bottomless. Is that kind of what you're seeing in the hospitality industry?
Well, overall, in a macro sense, yes, there is a clear amount of supply coming into major markets, largely driven by continued success in the industry plus favorable capital markets. Some markets, significantly greater amounts of incidence of new supply, certainly New York, Houston. Those are two very leading markets. But overall, there's incidence of new supply coming into markets globally.
Yes, of course. And of course, if you guys want to know all of the numbers and all of the stuff that we talk about, I get into it whenever I have Mr. Bruce Ford from Lodging Econometrics on the show. So just check out any of those episodes. We'll give you all the numbers. We'll give you all the stats. We'll give you the know-how on what you need to know over there. All right. So, Tom, I'm interested in talking with you because you've got a very high-end consultancy there. You've been around for a long time. You've been very experienced. So I'm hoping to talk to you a little bit about kind of how you see the state of things today. And honestly, I get tired of everyone saying, oh, we're in the 8th inning, of the game and all of that kind of stuff. I'm hoping we could get to some real practical information and insight that digs a little deeper than kind of what those CEOs like to tell us on stage, because you know how those CEOs go. They're always a little vague on information when they're on stage because they don't want to upset those stockholders. So how are you seeing the world? Let's start in terms of the big picture, and then maybe we could kind of dig down a little bit, because one of the things that I find is we talk about, hey, RevPAR slowing this year, but what does that really mean to guys in their individual business? So why don't you take it from here and tell me how you see things so far in summer 2017.
Very good. Thank you. Well, I think there, from our perspective, and we gain that perspective by being operating throughout the U.S., Western Europe, and with a virtual office in the Middle East. I think there are two major events of significance occurring in the industry today, and will gain power looking ahead. The first is basically the enormous impact that the Airbnbs of the world have had and the OTAs of the world have had. It's really changed the whole paradigm of how the industry operates. It's projected big numbers in New York for Airbnb as a percentage of room nights sold, probably now in excess of 6-7%. That's a real groundswell. And second, and separately, 25 years ago, it was very simple. Call Holidex, 1-800-HOLIDEX, and you got your room.
Right.
That's gone the way of the buggy.
Yep.
And that's going to continue of operating largely off of advances in information technology. That's in a runaway situation in our industry, and we don't even know what it's going to look like 5 years from now. So big changes on the way in which reservations and rooms are being booked, and substantial changes in alternative conventional lodging such as Airbnb.
Right.
That could be slowed down a little bit, and by the issue of that's going on in states as whether it be taxed or not. But for the time being, it's having a major impact. I think from the second.
Well, before we go on to that, Tom, before we move on to another aspect of what you're seeing out there, I actually got to speak with David Holyoke this past week. He's a global head of business travel with Airbnb, and he had some interesting things to say, so I'd be curious to see what you think about his comments. In particular, when it comes to business travel, Airbnb right now, 15% of their business is business travel, and by 2020, they expect that to rise to 30% of their entire business. Now, that's not actually doubling their business. It's more like quadrupling their business because he says the company is growing so fast, so quickly when it comes to business travel, and they're adding 18,000 new companies doing business with them each and every single week. That's pretty unbelievable. They also have 2 million listings of private homes or apartments right now. And when it comes to business travel, they should be really focusing on this hard. And one thing I noticed, Tom, at the GBTA event this week is Airbnb is no longer a dirty word. They're part of everyday conversation. They're now becoming mainstream. What do you think about that?
I think it's absolutely a realistic and prescient forecast. And let me tell you where I think the origin is this. I started a brand which is now called Embassy Suites. That was the first job I had in the industry.
No way. How cool is that?
Yeah, it was really cool. And here's the thing is that, we had two rooms for the price of one. You had your living room, you had your bedroom, you had your little kitchen. That was motivated out of necessity. People purchased that because they needed space, either for their family or for an extended stay. And what you're seeing, I think, with what the industry is experiencing with Airbnb's mix of businesses, increasingly corporate, is just that, is that corporate travelers who are going to be in a market more than a night, maybe it's 5 nights, 6 nights, 7 nights, they're motivated on a necessity to have more than just a 350 square foot room, period. So I can see that. Now, whether the industry can respond in kind, I'm not sure, but I will tell you that I think the suite hotel brands of the world, whether it's Embassy Suites or Residence Inn or Homewood Suites, I think they're primed looking ahead, and that's why you're seeing so much development occurring around the homes of the residences, is that the corporate traveler likes that space.
You got that right. And I'll tell you a little story, Tom. When I was at GBTA last week, I went the traditional route. I looked for your typical everyday hotels for me to stay in, and they were asking what I considered to be extremely high rates, in the neighborhood of $300 to $400 per night during the GBTA event. And I wasn't just booking a room for myself. I was booking a room for my producer for the Here to Stay TV project as well. So we're talking $700 to $800 a night. I got a 2-bedroom Airbnb apartment less than a mile away from where I needed to be at the convention center that was absolutely gorgeous with keyless entry. I just had to type in some passwords so I didn't have to meet with anybody. And the whole thing came in at $1,200 for the 3 nights for the both of us. We had a lot more space and we were able to hang out and be productive and do our editing and all of the stuff that we needed to do. And I got to tell you, I came away with thinking that that was a really terrific experience. Meanwhile, I look at what the hotel industry is doing when it comes to construction and development overall, and they're telling us that customers are looking for small rooms and all they want to do is hang out in the lobby. I'm starting to see a little bit of a conflict now between the way that I want to use the hotel room and what the hotel industry is telling me how I want to use a hotel room. How do you see that?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, you were motivated to seek an alternative because you have the good sense of spending money wisely, right?
Well, no matter what, it doesn't matter that someone else is paying my expenses. We need to respect everybody's dollars.
Absolutely. And I think, your frequent business traveler, the drummer who's out on Monday, back on Thursday, has got the same responsibility. But in addition to the economic value or the value add is the point you made, and that is you had more facility for less money. That's a great value statement.
Yeah, and it was great. It was a seamless experience, and the only thing I'll put in quotes, missed out on was daily housekeeping, which is not something that I'm finding as I get older is as much as a necessity as it used to be in my life. Yeah. So I found it to be a completely interesting experience that I had, and I had never done it as a business traveler before. And, I go to all these conferences over the years, and I see people denying at the top levels that it's not affecting anything, but I'm starting to sense this is going to become a real issue for traditional hotel companies.
Let me ask you this.
Yes,
in the discussion with the Airbnb executive you mentioned, did he opine on which chain scale they were affecting the most, whether it was mid-scale, upper upscale, blah blah blah? Did he address that at all?
He did not speak to that specifically because we focused more on what his business was all about and his goals, not where he's going to be chomping up the other things. But I will tell you another thing based on your question from my own personal observations, Tom, is I think our industry is too caught up with those industry segments, and customers don't see it the same sort of way. They don't go, I'm going to stay at an upper scale hotel this time, and I'm going to stay at a mid scale with food and beverage next time. They just look at it as this is a brand I like at the price I want that has the services and amenities that I'm interested in. And I think that we're a little blind by not acknowledging how customers actually view our products by shoehorning them into categories that STR believes are the best for us. Right?
Well,
I know. Digest that, Tom.
No, I think I would disagree with that to
okay, go for it.
A certain extent. I think I guess you can sort of jump into a second interesting topic here, and that is to what extent, if any, consumers get it with the incredible proliferation of trademarks in the industry now.
Right.
I mean, if you combine Starwood and Marriott together, I believe then there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 to 30 trademarks.
I think it's 32 brands. Right.
Okay, 32 brands. Believe it or not, if you sat down 10 consumers and asked them to, give me some description of 32 individual brands, how many of those 10 do you think could remotely get 10 right, let alone 32 right? Probably none.
I don't even think that the people at the highest levels of the company can get it right. Not to insult them. I just think we're at that point.
No, they can't. They can't. And the lines are blurring to a certain advantage. Take just real quickly, I'll make this clear. The upscale select service category that's populated by the Hilton Garden Inns, the Courtyard by Marriott's, the Homewood Suites Residences, the brand sponsors have created standards for those trademarks, those sub-brands. The product standards are the equivalent of what full-service upper upscale standards 10 years ago, whether it was FF&E or illumination or ingress and ingress out of buildings. So you have these upscale select service products, especially in urban infill locations, mimicking upper upscale full service products. Right. So I do believe that where I differed with your assessment of things is I do think the especially the frequent corporate traveler, they get it when it comes to understanding the quality of select service product today. It's migrated way up and they like it.
I agree with you on that. I think I should have probably been more clear to say I was thinking about the average, the average leisure traveler when it comes to
they haven't a clue.
Right. But I do love it when people disagree with me because it makes for better conversation. I hate the last thing I hate is we're all patting each other on the backs for having the same exact idea because that's not really extending the discourse and helping us all be more successful, which is what I want.
You ought to join. You ought to come to lunch one day at the TR Engel group. We're always disagreeing.
I'd love that. We should, not to take up everyone's time listening to this, but I'll get myself up to Boston. We can have a great roundtable podcast or something like that with everybody arguing with each other because that's fun. Great. That's interesting. And it's nice for people to hear other people complain other than, myself there, Tom. So, another thought that I have is one of the expressions that I'm hearing is, swim lanes, defining swim lanes. With so many brands, I think that becomes ever more challenging. Do you see that at some point the hotel companies are just going to find it impossible to have clear differentiation between their brands? I know some of them have always had trouble with that, but I think it's going to become a bigger problem as we go forward.
I do. I guess this is a real hot topic and a very important one for us, given our involvement with high-end independent product today. I think that the soft brands, if you will, the proliferation of soft brands, the AC.
And I like that you brought that in because that's actually one of our topic points for today. Let's get word. We're going too far off, but thanks for bringing it back. Okay, go for it. Sorry.
Well, we just did a very extensive review of soft brands from the brand sponsors, and including Hyatt and Wyndham and Marriott, of course, and Hilton, and I really believe that this was first and foremost motivated to overcome areas of protection problems.
Absolutely.
Is that, they wouldn't get criticized or brought to court by existing owners with the Marriott trademark if they had a AC as opposed to a full-service Marriott for that new development.
No, you're absolutely right, Tom.
So that's number one.
Right,
number
and let me just clarify that a little more for people. There's a lot of guys out there whose career it is selling franchises, and the hotel companies make a lot of money by selling franchises. So by necessity and by Wall Street, they've got to continue to sell. So that means by nature, you need to introduce more brands because there's only so many street corners in a neighborhood that you can do that single brand for, right? So this is what we're talking about.
Correct. Well, we're talking about that. We're also talking about overcoming a problem because if they already sold a franchise on a corner at 17th and Vine and they have an opportunity at 20th and Vine, they can't sell the same brand.
Right.
They got to find another one.
That's what I'm saying. They bring in another brand and then they can sell it, and then you can have 5 brands in a 5-block radius, protect themselves legally, make the most money, and I think sometimes the hotel owners start to scratch their head. But they usually have a chance to own some of those other hotels. And, I mean, if it wasn't going to be that family of brands, it'll be another one that's going to come in across the street.
Right, exactly. So that's number one. Number two motivation here, and I found this extremely interesting, is the move now amongst what previously was pure play independent hotels, like, say, the Envoy Hotel in Boston in the Seaport District. A hotel that was born 4, 5, 6 years ago is a pure play independent. Name any of them. They're now seriously researching and investigating the cost-benefit associated with becoming an AC or a Curio or a Tapestry. And that is what has given tremendous rise to the proliferation of the soft brands. The question in our mind is the cost-benefit relationship, because it's not cheap.
No.
You got to get your ticket punched up front with a substantial $75,000 to $100 application fee. Then you have training fees. Then you have your res fees and your affiliation fees. So when you roll that up, Glenn, you're talking about 6 to 8 points of incremental expense on your P&L. Mm-hmm. And the question is, can you justify that by equal amounts or, importantly, greater amounts in the bottom line?
Right.
So that in the end, you're not just incurring incremental expense and reduced bottom line, you're incurring incremental expense, but the return on that invested working capital is greater than if you had not embraced the affiliation.
So I guess, if you're an owner, you've got to put it through, hey, can I make up that difference on my own, or is
Absolutely.
It worth it to just invest in the brand and let them do some of the heavy lifting in exchange for the expense that you're putting out there? And my guess is that every property is kind of different, Tom.
Well, it is different. It is certainly different, but what isn't different is that the reach that a soft brand affiliation can provide to an owner is typically far greater than what they can do on their own. And
yes.
That's the Frequent Traveler Program, the National Sales Affiliation and leads they get, blah, blah, blah. So I think this is it's a major innovation in the industry. As you pointed out, motivated by the desire to sell more trademarks and generate incremental cash flow to the brand sponsor, but simultaneously a potential substantial additional service to owners of what previously were pure play independents.
Right.
And we're in the thick of that in several situations right now that I can't go into because of confidentiality, but we're looking at it just as I described.
Right, you mean you're not going to destroy your entire career by revealing something that you can't on the show right now? Come on, Tom.
Right. It's not worth it.
Yeah. All right, so what I'm finding interesting, and this thought's just coming to my mind right now, is that the internet was supposed to be the great equalizer, right? No longer did you need to be tethered to that flag in order to be really successful, because you can create an equal outpost on the internet to capture the attention of customers. But what we're seeing now is that that's not necessarily the case. Independent hoteliers don't have that negotiating power at the OTA, so it costs more for them to get those individual reservations. They're not necessarily as skilled in the ability to be seen on the internet in the same ways as some of these soft brand relationships will provide you with. So it's great to see, in the scheme of things, how the major brands have made a comeback to kind of squelch that growth that we saw of all the independent hotels and kind of create this little place in the middle where they could get a piece and the owners can kind of keep that sense of independence as well. Yeah.
Well, you're touching on a really critical sort of strategic issue for the industry, Glenn, and that is the complication of competitively positioning your brand to succeed on the long term. I mean, what is it today? What is it today that is the most motivating factor for a consumer to choose your brand? Historically and traditionally it's been, well, you got the features and benefits that they want. Now there's such a proliferation of brands that the differences between those features and benefits, whether it's product features or service features, has narrowed significantly. There's so much equivalency across the brands. So what increasingly becomes the competitive edge is which brand or brand sponsor has the most substantial drivers for the marketplace in buying your product, whether it's with the internet or we haven't talked about it, but it is part of the internet, whether it's going online and utilizing one of the OTAs or whether it's through the social media.
Right.
So you've got these thousands of people now who didn't even exist 10 years ago, who are considered absolutely essential, can't live without them in attempting to drive demand for your product. It used to be the revenue managers as far as 5-8 years ago. I mean, they were taking over the industry. Well, hear now more about methods of making reservations as opposed to method of pricing your product. So
right.
I think what the theme of this discussion we're having is change is the only constant.
Yes, change is the only constant. I think that's great. And I think that maybe this takes us into the final topic we want to discuss today, management and franchise agreements. How do you see those changing? How can owners best take advantage of those situations now?
Well, I think it's interesting. I've been at this for a while, and as it pertains to hotel management agreements, Glenn, we have not seen, both with TRE and my private life on the capital side and on the brand side, I haven't seen the dramatic change in hotel management agreements than in the other topics we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fundamentals are you got to negotiate a base management fee, you got to negotiate an incentive management fee, and you have to negotiate termination. Probably the most significant variation that we see today, and this has become the sort of the lightning rod for hotel management agreements, mm-hmm. is performance features.
Right.
If you don't hit this bogey, 105% of RevPAR penetration or whatever the metric may be, then you're subject to getting thrown out.
Right.
That's something that you didn't see, certainly didn't see pre-Smith Travel Research because there was no way to measure it. But that's something that become profoundly more important, particularly as the institutional investor has taken over the industry. So on the HMA, the performance features is probably the most significant issue today that's being continuously negotiated. And frankly, there's a dual here is not only a performance feature, but then if it's a brand managed or a third party managed, if they fail the test,
right.
and they want to keep the contract, they got to pay off. And we just negotiated a couple contracts I could never have negotiated 10 years ago, where there was a performance feature, and if they didn't hit the bogey, they had a right to pay X amount of dollars to keep going. So that's I think the hot button today in hotel management agreements. Question on the franchise agreement, and incidentally, that's for both brand managed and third party managed.
Yes.
Franchise agreements, I think they're getting increasingly creative as well in this fashion. One, there's key money going into them, substantial key money, paying their way to get the contract.
Could you explain key money for folks listening to the show that might not be as inside as us?
Yeah, it's basically, here's $2 million. There's no carried interest. It's just $2 million gift from me, but I want a 20-year contract.
Right. Great.
It's not equity. It's not cash that buys them 2% or 10% of the deal. It's just a gift called key money. It's like putting the key in the door, opening it up, mm-hmm. for which you get a signed contract. I think that's a very significant feature of franchise agreements today, especially when you get into big deals of, say, new build hotels of $120 million. That really helps grease the skids for the developer and the capital investor with incremental free money in effect. Separately, I think the big issue in franchise agreements today is back to the point I made earlier with HMAs. There are performance features. If we affiliate, we just finished one. If we affiliate with your brand, we expect to have 105% penetration on average daily rate after 3 years. And they used to say 5 years ago, 6 years, jump in the lake, forget about it, go somewhere else. Today they'll say, fine, but here's my problem. I'm not managing it. Well, you're willing to franchise somebody who you think has sufficient skill sets to represent your company. Mm-hmm. Yourself accountable.
Right.
And that's how we got this done for this major investor. So summarily, the franchise agreements, I think today the most significant hot button is again on the issue of performance features, and this is gonna grow as the number of brands and franchise affiliation grows in the industry.
Interesting. Any predictions on what's going to happen in the next few years as the market does soften? I feel like we've been in this growth thing for now, 9 years or something crazy like that. It's going to have to turn at some point. Does that change the brand's strategy at all?
Good question. I'll tell you what, I was really proven wrong on a prediction. I couldn't have been more wrong. I thought
good for you taking credit for it, by the way. No, let's hear it. What was it?
Well, I've been proven wrong on a lot of things over the years, but I thought when Marriott acquired Starwood that they would start throwing brands overboard, that they'd vet out, forget about 4 Points.
Yeah, right.
I thought they'd basically, fold something into a Westin.
Yes, I can't disagree. I thought the same thing. Go on.
No, and they're just. But so no, I'm scratching my head simply saying I don't think over time the proliferation of brands, it can't continue. If anything, it's got to shrink because in the end they're going to wind up, as you pointed on early on, particularly in the leisure community, the leisure transient business, not knowing what the hell the difference is between the different marks. Right. Zero.
Yeah.
And then you get into trouble then because it all becomes a commodity. There's no value add, blah, 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 and you start losing profits.
Oh, boy. Well, that's the endless circle of our business.
That's it.
The ups, the downs, but there's one thing I can say, no matter what happens, it is interesting. And that's why I love being in this sector. All right, we're about out of time. Any final words, sir?
No, I guess the only advice I would give to my colleagues, both on the brand side and the institutional investor side, where we operate most frequently as asset managers and advisors, is just really ultimately focus on the consumer and trying to do the right things right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And now you've earned this. You get your shameless plug. How can people find you? How can people connect with you?
Great.
You want to just,
thank you.
No, tell us. How can we find you? Tell them, call to action. Get them to call you. Get some business out of this, baby.
I apologize. I missed that. Yeah, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is via my email address, which is Thomas Engel, Engel, at TREngelgroup.com.
All right, I've been wondering this for a lot of years. What's the R stand for?
Richard.
You had to think about that for a second.
Yeah, I immodestly named myself after my baptismal name.
Nice. I love it. All right. Before we go to commercial break, I do want to say one thing. I'm deeply saddened by the passing of our industry colleague, Jesse Kalischer, who was always a great friend to me throughout the years. He was a phenomenal artist and a spectacular photographer, and somebody that I always wish that I could espouse to be like. He was a consummate family man, took his kids absolutely everywhere around the globe with him, and I think that he packed 150 years into his short life. And I'm going to miss this guy so much. I love Jesse. He was a real inspiration to me and the consummate artist. I hope you guys check him out. He's got work that's in the Louvre and around the world. Really, really wonderful human being, and he will be missed. And for the rest of you, we'll be back after this commercial break. I want to thank you all for listening to the No Vacancy podcast, and God bless Mr. Kalischer. We'll be back after this break.
Have a question for your host, Glenn? Tweet him now at Traveling Glenn. No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, Glenn here, and if you're like me, then I know that you love terrific art. Art that creates a sense of place. Art that tells a story of where you are. Art that adds a level of detail that you can't get anywhere else. And the great folks that do this, Kevin Barry Fine Art Associates. You can find them online at kevinbarryfineart.com, and I highly encourage that you check them out. One recent project that I'm totally in love with is the Fairmont, Washington, D.C., where they created a custom project with a local artist, and they created some of this on site. They actually created a multi-dimensional wall sculpture from gold blocks, which is an abstracted map grid of the Washington, D.C. area. It's got different elevations to it and looks absolutely fantastic. It was done along with Deborah Forrest and Amanda Jackson of Forrest Perkins, which is now Perkins Eastman. And they all work together to create this fabulous new look. So if you want to create a fabulous new look for your hotel, or if you just love great art, check out kevinbarryfineart.com or give him a call at 310-945-2655. Let him know Glenn sent you.
Back to the show. It's No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast with your host, Glenn Hausman.
All right, so one of the things that I really think about a lot is how much I like hotels. I love staying in hotels. I love the experience of hotels. And, you know, I just love being a part of the whole hospitality environment. And one of the things, I think to me, the best moment I have is, you know, feeling that sense of satisfaction with there and really being a fan of the particular brand that I'm staying at. And to me, it's putting my key in the door, opening that door, stepping into the room, and feeling like I have a trip bound with possibilities. And I think there's a lot of other folks that feel that way, too. One of which I'm going to, you know, take a guess and say it's Mr. Rick Garlick, who I got back with me with JD Power. He's the practice lead of Travel and Hospitality Division. We're going to talk a little bit about people finding satisfaction in their hotels and how we stand. Rick, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm very well. You know, it's always a pleasure to be with my old friend Glenn.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, Rick means old, meaning that I'm getting old, not that we've known each other for a long time.
Oh, that's not true.
All right. So, I'm excited to have you back on the show. And guys, you know, Rick and I really hit it off on the March 31st show. We talked about social media myths that were out there and how you really approach it. So I encourage you to check back on that show, listen to it. I think you'll find it really interesting. And today we're going to talk about hotel segments and ranking. Something I think Rick, that's pretty much what JD Power, at least I know, you know, you guys cut your teeth with here in the hospitality industry.
Well, you know, that's what we're known for. But, you know, I really want to get back to the comments you made when you were first introducing the segment.
Yep.
You were talking about this experience that you imagine and envision in hotels that wasn't just simply walking in and finding a clean room and a shower that was hot and a comfortable bed and efficient check-in. What you talked about was really an emotional experience. Right. Where we all have those in our memory banks, right? When we go to a hotel stay and something extraordinary has happened. So I hope that during the course of the conversation today, we're not just going to talk about who ranked where and when, but really what is it that connects guests to hotels and brands and creates that kind of love that you described at the onset of our conversation.
Right, and I appreciate that you say that because, Rick, isn't that what this is all about? It's making sure that every single person does feel like at the end of their stay that they made the right choice and then feel passionate about it to not just come back, but then to share that with absolutely everybody else in their lives, right?
Well, one would think that. And really, when you read business books about what the most successful brands do differently, they focus on that emotional piece. I think, if I could just say a bit of a word about our industry at one point, I think that there are a lot of people who approach the hotel business from maybe an operational perspective. You know, heads in beds, keep the quality consistent, deliver on the basics, but not necessarily focus on the things you and I are talking about.
Right.
And hopefully those listening to this podcast will find this to be an enlightening conversation and maybe get them to think about the aspects of the hotel that go beyond what I would call the rational quality components. Now, our J.D. Power study really does focus on a lot of those rational quality components, but we really take it beyond that. I like to think that hotels are doing a much better job of being sort of the Match.com these days between their guests and hotel choices. Because it used to be people would have basically three criteria for choosing a property. One would be location, one would be price, and one would be brand name. Now, the point that you were raising before is, people go and they have these experiences at hotels. They love to write about it. People are giving more feedback now than ever before. The customer satisfaction survey, despite misgivings to the contrary, is alive and well and doing just fine in the context of the guest experience feedback tool. But we look at all this, and what we want to uncover today, Glenn, is to talk about the pieces of that experience that really drive that connection and ultimately drive profitability for the brand.
All right, great. So let's get into it. I do want to say that the 2017 North America Hotel Guest Satisfaction Index Study. Whew, you got to work on cutting down those names. I'm exhausted from saying it.
NHGSI.
Yes, all right. The GSI. You did a study between June 2016 and May 2017, speaking with more than 63,000 people in the United States and Canada staying in North America during May to May of 2016 to 2017. So a wide group of people. This is not one of those normal, hey, we speak to 2,500 people. This is a very detailed experience that you go through every year in order to pull this together. Maybe you could tell me before we get into the results how it's all put together so we can understand it a little bit more in detail.
Well, thank you for asking. I appreciate that, because our survey is extremely comprehensive. When you go into the public and you give awards based on quality rankings, you want to make sure you've really, really done a comprehensive review. So you're not just asking a single question or about a few limited areas, but you're asking about every aspect and every touch point of the guest experience. Many people would be surprised to learn that this survey takes about 20 minutes of a respondent's time to take.
Wow, it's serious time.
People ask me, who takes a survey that lasts 20 minutes these days? My response to that is over 63,000 people.
Right.
So, a lot of people are engaged in it because they want to give that feedback, right? And they like the idea of talking about or providing feedback regarding recent experiences they've had. So we take those different touch points and we look at really the major factors that people engage in during their stay, the touch points. So we look at things like the reservation experience, the arrival-departure experience, the guest room, hotel facilities, hotel services, and then, of course, food and beverage, and finally, the cost and fees, the perceived value for the price paid. And we put that into a weighted average model based on statistical regression modeling and a lot of things I won't get into boring detail here, but it really comes out to be a pretty scientifically sophisticated model that we use to ultimately come up with a 1,000-point index score.
Right.
So that's the basis for our determination of the award ranking.
Okay, so is this getting more complicated for you as years go by and that we see this insane proliferation of brands? And for that matter, what makes up a brand? Well,
it's interesting. It kind of you're raising a bigger question of like, do brands matter? Yeah. And really, I believe the answer is yes. Now, I have a very close friend who probably will listen to this podcast and he'll know who I'm talking about, who one time told me the story of how he went before a group of hotel executives and put down a $100 bill and said, if anybody can tell me the difference between, and he named several brands, I will give you this $100 bill. And he ended up taking the $100 bill away. That nobody could articulate the difference between, say, several brands in a category that seem very similar.
Well, I got the answer right there. The name on the flag.
Well,
boom! I'm $100 richer.
More than the name of the flag. Let's hope it's more than the sign.
Yeah, right.
I actually, that's a conversation I actually had one time where I asked a hotel executive, what are the difference between these various brands in your portfolio? And he actually told me the sign on the door.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more effort now going into brand differentiation. You hear a lot about lifestyle brands.
Right.
And the like. And people are really trying to create very specific niche offerings for the individual that not just differ in decor, but differ in the feel and the values that you experience when you stay at these hotels. And I think the answer to that question, what's the difference between these brands, is becoming more apparent now than, say, it might have been even a few years ago.
Right, and there's definitely part of me that completely agrees with you, because you've got to get aggressive in your positioning, and I think in the sense of doing that, you're finding a more and more niche audience that you're trying to appeal to. And I think some brands are doing it exceptionally well in the sense that they know exactly who that audience is and how to target that audience, while other brands are still trying to appeal more towards a mindset than a specific set of behaviors, if that makes sense to you.
Well, and it's interesting that values matter.
Mm-hmm.
The values of the brand. So, for example, I'm just writing a piece now on sustainability. Does sustainability really make a difference for hotel brands?
Right.
And we're finding that while being green may not be a primary choice driver, that hotels that are seen as environmentally responsible have higher satisfaction scores across the board, even among people that don't really even care about green issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. It's actually more of a value thing. And believe it or not, I just recently wrote a piece for a client that was kind of on this. So I'm looking at some information I just pulled up on the 2016 Deloitte Millennials Survey. And the study concluded that nearly 9 out of 10, 87% of people believe the success of a business should be measured in terms of more than just its financial importance. It's really about doing good for the world around you. 73% say they want businesses to maintain positive impact upon the society in general. So I think that's a really interesting statistic. So it's not just about how great of a hotel you are, but how the company positions itself within the scheme of the universe of life, I think.
Well, and I think it really, we purchase brands that are a reflection of who we are and our own individual values.
Right.
I talk about something called identification. A question that I used to ask on some of my surveys were, if this brand were a person, are they somebody that you'd want to hang out with?
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that, again, there's certain brands, and I can say this, I'm a little older. I come into some of these hotels that seem to be what I call chronically hip.
Right.
And I come in, and I appreciate what they're doing.
Right.
But I kind of say, this really isn't me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is really not me.
And that's okay. Right.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not their customer.
Right.
And I think really the success of these brands really depends on how well they know their customer and can target a very specific offering toward that customer.
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'll use an example
Please.
of one of the chains that got a top ranking in our J.D. Power study that has actually surprised a lot of people. It's America's Best Value Inn. Mm-hmm. They were top ranked within our economy segment. And a lot of people were rather surprised by that because they're often seen as a roadside hotel that, maybe appeals to truck drivers and transients and so far.
Mm-hmm.
And you're driving down the road and you need a place to stay and you see an America's Best Value Inn. And, for many people, they're very no frills. But when we looked at why they won, what made the difference and why they prevailed over others is that they primarily drew males, mm-hmm. and males tend to be a little bit lighter on their ratings than female raters, and
mm-hmm.
Also they provided the basics.
Yeah.
That's what these customers wanted. Now, again, you can say, well, but they didn't do this, that, or the other thing. Well, again, they know their customer. They appeal to a particular segment of the world, of the traveling world. And they do what that customer is looking for. One of the things that we're quick to point out is in our J.D. Power study that this is not, a comparative
I was just going to bring that
one
up.
brand to another.
Mm-hmm.
This is a survey that measures that brand, that hotel's own customers.
Right, absolutely.
Not your customers rating my customers, but your customers rating you.
So the fact that America's Best Value Inn is a winner of the category is not to say something negative about the other folks within the category. It just means that the folks that stay at America's Best Value Inn are more fervently in love with the brand than perhaps other folks feel about other economy brands. Right?
Yes, and for whatever reasons. And, we get the same thing in our airline study. Southwest Airlines won this year.
Right.
And sometimes I'll give talks about Southwest Airlines, and I'll bring them up as an example of a company that really knows its customers and really knows what its customers want. Mm-hmm. And I get executives who invariably raise their hand and say, I never fly Southwest if I have any alternative whatsoever. I hate that airline.
Right.
And my response is, well, you know what? You're not their customer.
Yeah.
You
Agreed.
can't appeal to everybody. And, you look at other airlines, and they're more geared toward business travelers, hotels.
Yep.
Even some of the economy hotels are really trying to go not for the leisure customer, not the family traveling on vacation and they need a place to stay. They're actually trying to appeal more toward a business customer who might be more inclined to stay at a mid-scale or upper mid-scale property. They believe that they can, sort of take away from that segment, and they're looking for a different type of customer, and therefore they have a different offering.
Right. And I think the point here in 2017 is more than ever you have to understand who that customer is that ultimately you're looking for, to rehash kind of the whole theme of the conversation we're having. If you don't know specifically who those people are and how to make them want to make you a J.D. Power Award winner, then I think that's where the problem lies.
Correct. And I've even said to certain brands that they could raise their satisfaction ratings by doing nothing other than getting a more appropriate mix of customers for their offering.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So instead of trying to, do the old throw it at the wall and see what sticks, figure out, what's going to stick ahead of time, and then put all of your energy towards that particular group of people.
Well, and, you look at it, and I was starting to talk a little bit before. It used to be that you chose based on price, location, and brand. That's what you had. Mm-hmm. Now you have the benefit of all of this information in the marketplace through review sites and TripAdvisor and social media and all of these different outlets. So it's very much like I was saying, sort of like hotels can match their customers much better. It's sort of like you have the ability now to get beyond just those surface level qualities and really look to see what do these hotels offer that either appeals to me or doesn't appeal to me, so I can make a more informed choice. And a lot of our belief about guest satisfaction is that it's continued to rise in the last several years, not just simply because the product and service have gotten better, which it has, but also that people themselves are making better choices of selecting hotels that better match their needs.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just the hotel side, it's the consumer side too. Both groups are trying to find each other almost, which brings you back to that Match.com kind of statement, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, like TripAdvisor and even OTAs like Expedia are sort of, they play that role. They match the right customer to the right offering, and that's why I believe that satisfaction is, at least in part, rising year after year, not to mention the fact that if you think about what you get in a hotel stay, even in a mid-scale property, you used to, if you stayed at a mid-scale hotel, you might get a cold breakfast and a stale muffin and cold cereal. Mm-hmm. And now you get this full hot breakfast with oatmeal and pancakes, and you can take it to go. And even at the mid-scale level, everything has gotten so much better.
It really has.
And some of our data suggests that maybe hotels have reached a point where they're doing as much as they can for their guests at this price point. And the next big thing will be technology, and how hotels are able to effectively use technology.
Absolutely, and we should probably have you back on again to talk about that topic alone. But a couple of observations. One, I wish the Boston Convention Center would understand that stale muffins are not good. I had my fill of those this week there. And number two, hotel brands. You want to focus the world on, you want to be more like Match.com, like we said, and not like Tinder. You don't want a one-and-done kind of situation. You want a lifelong relationship, right?
Correct. Now, there's the customer also that we talk about in our study called the constrained choice customer. Mm-hmm. They are people that don't choose the hotel. Someone else chooses that hotel for them.
Right.
So let's say, you spoke at the Boston Convention Center, so maybe there was a particular hotel that was the hotel of choice for that meeting. They gave you a special rate,
yes.
You stay here, a special convention rate.
And I typically do that.
Mm-hmm. Or let's say that you're going to your friend's wedding, and the wedding party is all booked at this one particular hotel. So you're sort of, if you will, forced to stay certain places that you may otherwise not choose.
Right.
And meeting hotels, not surprisingly, get a large portion of those constrained choice customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not a shock, they tend to, on the whole, be rated a bit lower in satisfaction because, again, it's not this perfect match between what I might have been looking for and where I ended up staying.
Right.
But as I always like to say, just continuing this sort of Match.com analogy, which I like, is that sometimes arranged marriages can end up in love. That it's an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to a customer who might otherwise not have stayed with you, and to make that favorable impression so that they become a lifelong advocate.
Right. Great. I absolutely love that. So let's get more into the results of the study before we run out of time, Rick. I feel like we could just talk all day long.
Oh, I know we can.
Yeah. So, all right. So we talked economy, America's Best Value Inn. So congratulations to the good folks at the Red Lion Hotels Corporation and brand founders Bernie Moyle and Roger Bloss, two guys that I've known for many, many years. So great job on that. What happens when we go up to mid-scale?
Okay, so Wingate by Wyndham for the third straight year wins the top award of the mid-scale category. Best Western actually made a very nice run.
Good.
They ended up only 4 points behind in second place. They were actually also on the food and beverage factor, which is breakfast. Ended up topping that mid-scale category. But Wingate, always a solid offering. Best Western doing a lot of things to improve to number 2.
That's great. So maybe by next year, maybe they'll knock it off, and we'll have a new
competition
victor.
Is always a good thing.
It really does. I think competition makes all of us better out there, right?
Yeah, the traveler is the beneficiary.
Yes, for sure. So so Wingate, what are they doing specifically that is absolutely right that their guests love?
Well, again, it's all about consistency, right?
Right.
And the Wyndham Corporation is a franchisor of hotels. And so, they've got, I think, a little bit extra challenge there trying to drive that consistency. But good brand standards, good consistent offering.
Yep.
And, again, I think at the mid-scale segment, what the traveler really looks for is that predictability.
Right.
So you're traveling and you're staying in a mid-scale hotel. You don't want any negative surprises.
Right.
So they do a great job on that. Upper mid-scale.
All right, before we go into that, let me just say one thing. I want to congratulate Jeff Bellotti and the team over at Wyndham Hotels Group for the big American Inn purchase this week for $170 million.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, I tell you, they're actually a fairly strong brand as well.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Paul Kerwin and all the stuff that he's been doing running that brand over the years.
Yeah, and I think that American is going to do really well under Wyndham's leadership.
Excellent. Okay, so moving on. Upper mid-scale.
Upper mid-scale is no surprise at all. For the 13th straight year, Drury Hotels and Suites is the top ranked.
Now, I've never stayed at a Drury, and I feel derelict. I know.
You really do. They're a family-owned and operated company out of St. Louis, Missouri. Extremely nice people. I know the Drurys very well. I consider Chuck Drury a friend. And,
great.
His staff, Eric Strand, and some of the other folks over there. They're great people who are really focused on doing everything right. And because it's a family-owned operation, they have a lot more control over their properties, which probably in some people's mind gives them a bit of an advantage. But, I know, like I say, I know the Drury family, and I know how much they really, really value year after year.
Yep.
I tell them they're like the St. Louis Cardinals. The St. Louis Cardinals are always independent race every year. And, it's one thing to win. It's another thing to stay at the top, and they've been doing it for 13 straight years. And a very, very fine upper mid-scale offering.
And how are they, I don't know if you have an answer to this, but how the heck are they staying on their own when everybody else is consolidating? That's got to take some, guts to be able to turn down all the money I'm sure they're being offered.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, I think I'm just going to say this. The Drury family started that chain, and they have a lot of family pride.
Yep.
And, again, they're wonderful people. I can't say enough about them on a personal level. And again, if you ever hear me talk about hotels and what really drives positive experience, I always talk about how everything starts at the top and filters down. And I think it's the mission that those folks drive that I think that they would probably be bothered by the idea of someone else running their hotels with their name on it.
I think so too. It's just 140 hotels in 21 states, according to their webpage. It's got to be challenging for them to continue to battle for that market share as time goes on. Not saying that they can't, not saying that they won't excel, and not saying they won't be there for 20 years more in a row. But I think with the way the market is changing, it's amazing to see that they're still holding on when all these other smaller companies seem to be saying, all right, it's time for us to give up and join a bigger group.
Well, and what's interesting about them, again, just to talk a little bit more, is that they're rated best in their segment on cost and fee satisfaction, so price value.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And yet, within the mid-scale market, they get the smallest proportion of people who stay there because of price.
Right.
And they've just got a very unique offering. Now, again, I think we hear it from other people in the industry. They not only give you free breakfast, but they also give you dinner. Hot dogs and salad and things like that for dinner, and even a couple of glasses of wine at a mid-scale hotel. Yeah. And,
they call that the 5:30 kickback.
Well, they always like to say at Drury, the extras aren't extra.
I love it. That's really terrific. All right, Juries, I'm going to come and stay with you as soon as I possibly can. And, got to research these things there, Rick, right?
Yes, you do.
Right.
Yes, you do.
Let's go to upscale. Who's the winner?
Well, our old friends at Hilton Garden Inn.
Mm-hmm.
They're also a what I would call a usual suspect in the category. Again, know the folks at Hilton really well. Hilton's a brand that needs no explanation as to why they're always a top brand. They focus on consistent quality. The brand, the quality goes in before the name goes on, sort of thing. And that they do also a very, very good job on the food and beverage part of their experience, and for an upscale hotel that's a very nice bonus.
Excellent. And, I'm also, I love where they've been. I've always been a fan of that particular brand. I think, they're doing a great job right now with just being consistent and giving people what they are looking for. I know Adrian Curry ran that brand for a long time. He's moved on to a different Hilton brand now, Homewood, and the extended stay product. But great stuff, and one of the brands that I've always enjoyed staying at for sure. And you're right, one of the usual suspects indeed. So what happens when we move up to upper upscale?
Well, now this is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Hyatt tops the upper upscale category. Now, again, there's Hyatts, there's Park Hyatts, there's Hyatt Regencies, and the Hyatt brand itself is actually kind of going away. So it's interesting. They're turning and converting a lot of the hotels into Hyatt-centrics. And,
right.
So this will not be a repeat winner, only because they're converting the brand to other properties. So it's like I say, Hyatt know the folks real well, but they have. If you look at our other categories, last year they were also Hyatt House was number one in the extended stay category. They finished 1 point out of first this year. Hyatt Place is always near the top in the upscale category, and again, just quality hotel organizations. I think that's the one common thread we can say, even though different companies top the rankings in the different categories, that they all do a good job at focusing on what their customers want, and also providing that unique experience that people walk away from the brand saying, boy, this is somewhere I really want to come back to.
Right. And to be fair, I don't think there's any major hotel company out there that's not doing a really good job. And that's not what this whole conversation is about. I do in particular think Hyatt has done some fascinating and interesting things that I think are really driving their business in a smart way over the last 7 to 10 years. I mean, Mark Koplamazian as CEO is doing really great stuff and brought back, I think, Hyatt into that stay conversation where for a while, before he came aboard, they seem to have not really been there anymore. Does that make sense? Yeah. Sorry, it's Friday afternoon recording this. I'm getting a little,
No, I was going to say that, Hyatt has a special place in my career in that they were the first large hotel client of any size with which I worked back in the 90s. And, I designed their guest satisfaction tracking program at the time, and I've had a very, very long history with Hyatt.
Right.
And one of the things I can say that they've done over the course of 20 years, and hasn't necessarily taken them 20 years to get there, but certainly when I started working with them to where they are today, it's that whole consistency thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you stayed at a Hyatt Regency, a Park Hyatt, a Hyatt, I don't want to call them a regular Hyatt, but
traditional
Hyatt, Hyatt core hotel.
Beautiful.
That there was some varying quality that they did a really good job. The folks I worked with over in the quality assurance department did a really, really good job at working with the divisional vice presidents and the executives in charge of the brand to make sure that quality, was the band was tightened.
Mm-hmm.
So, they've done, even with some of the properties that I knew were traditionally a bit more challenged, that they've done a really nice job at going in and making that portfolio, sparkling and very, very nice.
Good. Well, congratulations to the good folks at Hyatt. Before we do luxury, I'd like very much to focus on extended stay, and then we can wrap up with the big luxury award winner there. So, extended stay, regular extended stay. What's the number one customer satisfaction so far?
Well, it's interesting that both in regular extended stay and upper extended stay were both two IHG brands.
Hey, good job.
Candlewood and Staybridge Suites.
Yep.
Won their categories, and so IHG basically just sort of dominates the extended stay tier in this particular year, and it's interesting that I don't have a real reason to stay at extended stay properties. But one of my buddies, who I'm very close to, he goes on the road and does 6 weeks at a time in different cities, putting together factories and assembly lines. And he always stays at Candlewood and Candlewood hotels and just absolutely raves about them. So IHG really seems to have the whole extended stay experience piece down very well. It's a competitive category, as you'd expect. There's a lot of good players, and I mentioned Hyatt House finished 1 point behind this year. Last year they won, and you've got others, Residence Inn, and certainly Home to Stay, with Hilton. Some of those brands, all very, very competitive. But IHG doing something right to get both top ranks this year. Awesome.
Well, congratulations to the team at IHG. I know all those folks very well. And they are really super products. Extended stay is really coming into focus right now. A lot of reporting I did this particular week at the GBTA event, Global Business Travel Association, surrounded that particular thing. I'm also working for something called, I'm hosting Here to Stay TV, which is focused on extended stay and service departments. So I'm getting very inculcated into that side of the business. I love it. I find it really interesting to me. And I think that there's a lot of legs to go in the future for extended stay product as well. All right. Rick,
so you save luxury to last, right?
Yeah, man. That's what the people like. I think it's for me. It's the one that luxury does grab all the headlines. So I'm almost resistant to want to give luxury the big final headline again. I like the bread and butter, of the industry. But luxury, what's the number one? Well, I feel like you should do a drum roll here.
You save luxury to last because I think it's one of the most interesting stories.
Agreed.
So you always want to save the most interesting story until the end of our time. And the luxury, we almost had a three-way tie.
Almost. Woo.
For the top luxury hotel. Now, Four Seasons ended up in second/third place.
Right.
1 point out of the number one slot.
Wow.
And, there are certain years when Four Seasons will take it, and it alternates back and forth with one of the winners, which is Ritz-Carlton, topped the survey.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what's interesting. For the first time, tying Ritz-Carlton for the number one rank, not just in the luxury segment, but also in the study overall,
right,
was J.W. Marriott.
Whoa!
So Ritz and J.W. Marriott, both Marriott-branded luxury hotels,
yep,
tied with one another. But if you've stayed at those, you know that they're very different luxury experiences.
Absolutely.
And this is back to what I was saying at the very beginning of the onset.
I love it. We're going to bring it full circle.
Well, we are, right? I mean, you've wrapped it up very nicely. We're coming back full circle. This shows you how J.W. Marriott and Ritz both appeal to a different type of luxury customer.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They're both categorized as luxury hotels by STR.
Yep.
But they have a very different constituency. Mm-hmm. Ritz-Carlton is what we would think of as traditional luxury, and JW Marriott is geared more toward the luxury business travel, the upscale business travel.
Yeah, I feel I emotionally connect much more with the JW product than the Ritz-Carlton product because I don't see myself as a traditional type of person enjoying luxury.
Well, isn't that great? Because you're a perfect illustration of everything we've been talking about.
Right.
That you identify a bit more, both luxury experiences, but you identify a bit more with the JW experience than the Ritz-Carlton
Agreed, because I feel like Ritz-Carlton is a little bit more fuss, and that's not really me, and the aesthetic is a little bit more traditional. I wanted a little bit, to my experience, a little bit more of that modern touch, that modern flair, and the JW Marriott seems to do that very, very well.
And isn't this a great example of, again, one company, both having two different luxury products, but being able to distinguish those brands apart from one another, back to the idea of brand matters, they're able to distinguish those brands apart from one another to the extent that both satisfy their customer base equally well, but draw a different type of customer. Otherwise, they'd be cannibalizing off of one another.
Right. And it's funny you should say that. When JW, they started to first start putting effort into JW, that's exactly what I thought was going to happen. I'm like, why do we need more than one luxury brand? And then it finally dawned on me after some time, because it takes me a little time to catch up to these things, that yes, there's a big enough audience that you can go for that niche product for each of those particular audiences, because one luxury hotel or one mid-scale hotel is not going to appeal to all different types of people. Beautiful. Interesting. Any advice for hotels, companies that want to be number one next year?
Yep. Know your customer. Resist the urge to go after price buyers, and make sure that you encourage all of your guests to leave reviews online, because what we find is that most of the reviews that people leave are positive and have that reinforcing effect of drawing other like-minded individuals back to the hotel. So,
beautiful. Excellent. All right. Well, how about some shameless plugs for yourself before we wrap up, Rick?
Well, J.D. Power is, as you know, arguably the best-known brand in customer satisfaction. A lot of people know us for automotive, but we're very strong in the travel space, not just in the hotel space, but we're also doing a lot of great work in airlines, rental cars, destinations, cruise lines, incentive travel, you name it, we work there. So would love to engage with any of your listeners who might be looking for a strategic partner.
Great. Anywhere particular way that they can find you that you would like to say on this show?
jdpower.com is always the best way. Just look us up there. You can click on the travel section, and it'll give all of our contact information, and we love to talk to new folks and old friends.
Great. And because she asked, I'd like to wish Shiloh a happy birthday today. So hope you guys all go out tonight and celebrate and have some fun. I want to thank all of you guys for listening to another fun episode here at the No Vacancy Podcast. And I will be back that next week. That is, I got a little problem. I'm going to go see some fish shows this week, so I'm not sure I'm ever going to come back from that. Too many shows, not enough time. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening to the No Vacancy Podcast.
Thanks so much for listening to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast, with your host, Glenn Hausman, online at rouse.media, on Twitter at Traveling Glenn, and on Facebook.com/Glenn.Hausman. We'll catch you next time.